So we're on today with Maria Ray, Boston Lloyd's mother, and I appreciate Maria you coming on today. I think probably very few people knew Boston as well as you and I did.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can bring some insight to his life and what happened, and maybe some things that people didn't know before.
Yeah, and you talked to him almost every day. You knew Boston when he was in diapers running around the gym. So you were the best person to talk to.
I first met Boston when he was a toddler. Literally, I was training at Gold's Gym Northridge. That was my gym at the time, and but we really didn't become friends until later when he was a teenager, started competing, and shortly after that, we started talking more and more, and became good friends after that.
Do you remember the daycare we had at the gym and Boston was in the daycare when he was
I do
little?
remember
Do you
it.
remember the daycare?
Yeah, I remember it. But like I said, he was a little kid, and I was a bodybuilder in the gym training, so it wasn't like I had a lot of conversation with him at that time.
No, but you remember him running around the place?
Oh yeah,
He was a handful.
yeah, he's a very hyper kid.
Yeah, hyper. Do you remember when he had trainers? Uh, we had a staff of 7 guy trainers, and each of them trained them. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday he had a different trainer.
Yeah, I didn't know about that specifically until you told me about it.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
he was. Yeah, he was in a lot of sports,
yeah,
and we used to have 2 nannies in the house to calm him down. Like if one couldn't take care of him, the other one did. So he was learning a little Spanish there because in California you have a lot of nannies that stay with you, and the nannies used to go back and forth to the daycare at Gold's Gym, and he had lots of friends there, and it was great because I got to train the moms, and he got to play with all the friends.
did he have ADHD?
He had oppositional defiance. I thought it was ADHD, but they said, you say one thing, he says another. He liked the combativeness, which made him famous in the long run because he knew how to piss people off, and he would walk away with a big smile on his face.
Yeah, that was him, definitely.
Oh yeah, he'd like to start crap. He'd get other people online to get mad at each other, and he'd just walk away and smile. And he did that in school with the teachers. He got everybody mad at each other, and he just had a big smile on his face.
Yeah, you were telling me he played a lot of sports when he was young, very
Yeah,
active in sports.
yeah, really active. I mean, he started at the age of 2 doing gymnastics, and he was in, let's see, no, maybe 18 months. He was in diapers and ballet, and he did wrestling. He did swimming. In fact, he was in the LA Times for swimming. Um, and he did high school wrestling. He was actually a really good basketball player. He started basketball probably about 7, and what do you call it? Pee wee football, and
Hmm.
then the other one, the and then he did football in high school, and he did basketball in high school, and he wrestled in high school. So back then he was pretty active. He was hyper. He was nonstop. I'd take him from one exercise, one thing to another to calm him down. So I don't know if it was ADHD or maybe a high testosterone level. The same reason why he had to have a one-on-one. And when he started getting aggravated in class, they'd pick him up and take him out, let him run around, play football or basketball or whatever, and then bring him back to class. He was gifted. He was a straight A student, and you probably know how he was very when he spoke. He was intellectual. He could speak
Yeah, he was a smart kid.
right without a college education. He did try. He did go to college, but he believed that he was smarter than everyone else.
Yeah,
So that was a hard thing. Even in the other schools, he would just be combative with the coaches and teachers that he knew more than they did. And a lot of times he did. And even the principal said he was a genius. So he was hard to deal with.
I was similar in my rebelliousness when I was a teenager.
Oh, you were?
especially when I got into bodybuilding.
Let me ask you, were you a high testosterone level? Because as long as I've known you, you've been very muscular all the time. You've never had any downtime.
Well, I don't really know because I started training when I was 12 or 13, but I did get muscular pretty quickly after I started training. I didn't measure my testosterone level when I was young, so I couldn't tell you that.
Well,
But
you could.
I was once I developed, I remember I had a high school uh, PE teacher named Mr. Vineyard, and I butted heads with him a great deal. He told me that I was too muscular, and because I couldn't touch my hands behind my back, but my lats were in the way. So
They didn't even know anything back then. That is so stupid.
yeah. So anyways, I actually had to have a meeting with my father with him because I wouldn't listen to this guy, and he would just make me run laps while everybody else played sports. I did run a lot of laps.
Well, that's what you got to do because if you have a high testosterone level, you gotta burn it out of that kid. Like Boston, highly intelligent, but he was hyper. How about that's in the special ed? He had to go to special ed, and a lot of those kids that looked like the farm team for the LA Lakers. There were some big kids in there that were bussed in from Compton.
Yeah, that's
And
I dealt with the same situation, the busing.
right. And Boston became friends with basically all of the big kids, mostly all the black kids that played basketball and football because they all beat each other up and they left me alone. You know, I remember he'd get in fights with kind of like chubby white kids and they'd be crying their eyes out and I'd have to go to school. Oh, he beat this person up or that person. But it wasn't that he was beating them up. It was just a plain fight. And the tougher kids, they just beat each other up and nobody said anything. And I think it was the high testosterone level that these kids have, and I think that they're not teaching these kids correctly that have that. That's why you have a lot of kids in special ed. Let them run around a little bit more because they're bigger kids, they're stronger. Uh, I believe they're intellectually smarter, but they're held back because this high energy, they can't sit still. So
Well,
they
I
get
was actually a really good student as far as like in class,
uh-huh,
but I would fight with the blacks. I
uh-huh.
remember from junior high school all the way through high school, the ones
Uh,
that were busing in because we had race riots and all kinds of things, and I was always fighting with them.
Oh no, Boston got along with him. In fact, they're his friends, and they spent the nights over our house, and it was one big happy family. And I think it's because the high energy.
But he came a bit after me, so I think
Probably.
it was
Yeah.
different back in my day.
Remember, we're from LA. Remember, it was more Hispanics, the ones that didn't speak good English, that he got in fights with because they were having trouble in school. And if they couldn't understand the ABCs and you're in school, Boston used to get frustrated because his high intelligence, when he was in class, he wanted to learn. He was a straight A student. And when kids would disrupt the classroom, that's where he would get kind of like, hey, I got to learn. But his thing
Yeah, I can
was,
see that. I remember
and I
being in similar
believe,
situations myself.
yeah, he got in trouble because he got mad at other kids because they weren't learning and he got mad and he wasn't not able to control his temper back then. That's why we had that one-on-one.
So let me ask you a question. So when he actually got into bodybuilding, like competing, something changed
Yeah,
because he went from being very athletic, kind of aggressive, to more mellow and a little bit lazy.
you're right because usually steroids make you more aggressive and angry, but it seemed to mellow him out. But remember, he went to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said when he hits puberty at 13 or 14, he'll either get worse, the neurons in the mass in the head will either join or they'll go nutty. Well, the psychologists and psychiatrists were right because when he hit 14 or hit puberty, he calmed down. He did calm down. But you're right about the steroids made him lazy because he worked out hard His form was always good, strict, slow, and controlled. Um, but he never went too heavy. He was never too crazy about that. But you're right, he got a little bit lazy and sat around, and he used the drugs to use the muscle, not the workouts. He always dieted. He always ate well up
Yeah,
until up until the end.
I I think yeah, I remember that I at the time thought maybe his genetics just weren't that great because
Oh,
when I met him, I mean, I re-met him when he was 17. He came to my gym after I hadn't seen him for a few years,
mm-hmm.
and he was competing. And I remember he was a skinny kid at that point, and at his age, I was a lot bigger than him, but I was training really hard. And then as I got to know him over the years, I realized he really didn't like to train that hard.
Well, that was later on. I mean, I think later on, after his teen years and the drugs, and then he got sluggish. I think taking all those drugs at such a young age did a job on him because remember he had that green crap coming out of his chest at 17. So
The
I believe,
gyno.
yeah, the gyno and the green. I mean, green stuff was just like shooting out. I remember he says, "Mom, look at this," and I went, "Woof!" And I said, "This ain't right."
So he was prone to conversion to estrogen. So maybe that was so,
I don't know.
it,
He was taking so much
well.
stuff.
That's
It's so,
that's what gyno comes from, mainly progesterone, estrogen. But like I never had gyno
did
ever.
you start at a young age like he did?
I started at 16.
You did too.
Yeah, 16. My first cycle was Anavar 3 milligram. Actually, I'm sorry, 2 milligram cereal tablets. I took 3 a day for 30 days. So I took 6 milligrams a day, and I gained probably 15 or 20 pounds just from that. Um, and after that, of course, I did other stuff, but I never took the dosages that he did. I think
Hmm.
it's just the times were different. When I started,
Are you obsessive compulsive like Boston is?
not at
Uh,
all. I don't. I don't have an addictive personality. I don't. I could
because as
take. I could take it or leave it.
long as I've known you, you've always been muscular and you've never been fat. So you don't have the ups and the downs. So you probably didn't do heavy drug. You stayed within your limits.
Well, again, back when I started, my mentors were the pro bodybuilders in the gym from basically the 80s. I started back in the 80s. So guys didn't take a lot of drugs back then, and it was very hush hush. There wasn't the internet. People weren't talking about it. To get stuff, I could get it, but it wasn't like talked about. Like in the gym, people didn't talk about it a lot. You had to know somebody, and I had a couple bodybuilder, top guys take me under their wing, but people in the 80s, we didn't take massive dosages. We thought we were taking a good amount, but
Do
we
you,
didn't.
do you remember the drug Blasterone? Because John took that.
I
Blasterone.
did. I did get a belastrone, and I took one shot of it, and I got a big abscess in my butt, and had to go to Kaiser and get it drained. I got
Mm-hmm.
infection overnight, so I don't know what was actually in that stuff. I've heard.
Was a combination. I remember John going to some sort of scientist guy who made it up, and this was the drug of the future. In fact, we had shirts that John would wear called said Blasterone on it.
Yeah, it was a white milky stuff, and all I know is I took one shot of it, and my training partner took one shot of it, and we both got an abscess within
No,
24 hours.
that might have been more heavy duty than the other ones, Blasterone.
I hear it was a combination of various things. It had like injectable anadrol in there and winstrol, and I don't know what else was in that. But like I said, I only took it the one time and got an abscess and never took it again.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well,
but
like John at because he's from that era, the '80 era, even the '79, I think, or '78, he competed. He got big, and then he'd blow up, and then he'd lose weight. I remember for his show, he was 244, and then right after the show, he was like almost 300 pounds in 4 days. Did you do that? Any of the blowing up of getting that?
well, that's just like water retention. But so like when I did the Teen USA, I really, really starved for that show because that's all we knew how to do. What I mean is, I ate uh, red snapper, lettuce, and distilled water for the last 6 weeks. Lived on fast and diet pills and trenbolone. That was it. And I was doing cardio twice a day and training twice a day, and that's just what we did back then because I didn't know anything
Cardio was
different.
more popular when we were doing bodybuilding. We did more cardio. It seems like they're not doing as much cardio.
Yeah, but that's just what I was taught, and I sucked down from probably 225 pounds, 230 pounds down to 190 something. Competed in the light heavyweight, and I won just because I was most shredded, and I did held enough muscle. I didn't lose all my muscle because obviously the anabolics, and I think the only drug I took for that was trenbolone, that trenbolone acetate for that particular contest. So it wasn't even like I had a whole bunch of different stuff that I was taking. It was just that.
Did you
Um,
get side effects?
what's that?
Did you get side effects from taking the drugs? I mean, like, how
I,
about you?
I would say the only side effect that I got, specifically from the trenbolone, was a really bad temper, which I didn't know. I didn't know at the time, but I
Are you,
don't
are
do
you,
well with that.
are you prone to have a temper? Because it would bring out your father.
Yes, yeah, I have a temper anyway, so that would just make me.
That would just make it. Now, did you get the lip dick syndrome too? Like from taking?
No, no,
No,
I didn't have that part,
no,
but
no.
I did have a temper and at that age, I didn't even real. I actually liked the way it made me feel because I felt really aggressive, and at the time I was bouncing in nightclubs in Hollywood, and I liked that feeling. But I realized, looking back on it, probably wasn't the best thing because you know I would lose my temper and do some really stupid things really quickly.
Hmm.
Now I noticed Boston. He never, at least he told me he never had that. He
Never. Well,
never felt that from it.
the worst he ever did, and we were getting in an argument because I was mad he was selling the drugs. I took his door off the hinges, and I got mad at him when we were arguing, and I said, "You need to leave the house," and he picked me up and whoop, threw me out like 747. That's the most aggressive you ever got with me because we were arguing about the steroids, and I took his door off, and he was mad about the door off. But other than that, he was pretty mellow. But John was pretty mellow too. I don't remember him beating up anybody.
Yeah, and so for me, even low doses, I seem to have a really strong response to it. Like I can't even the dosages he would take, which I never even thought of back in my day because I don't think anybody took that kind of dosages back when I was starting.
You know what I'm thinking too? Some of this stuff probably wasn't even real
Um, I don't know about that.
back when he was taking it back because he'd take it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you buy on the internet that really sucked. And he was in.
It's possible that he had fake stuff too, but
Oh, yeah, fake stuff.
there was real stuff also. But like, I can't even imagine the dosages that he talked about taking of like just trenbolone. I I would go crazy if I took that amount. It'd just be too much. Like psychologically, I don't think I could handle it. My blood pressure would go through the roof.
Oh yeah, I mean his was near the end with his kidney failure.
And I think that's might have been a problem because, like, for me, I could really feel, like, when I would take even a little bit, I could feel what it was doing to me. So
Well,
it didn't take much to have a big effect in the gym and physically too. Whereas maybe if he didn't feel anything, it took him a lot more just to feel something.
well, the thing is, genetically, are your parents aggressive? Do they have?
My father was a professional handball player, and he was known to yeah, get in some altercations at times.
Okay, so there's a genetic gene in there that you
Yeah,
probably even seen. Why
yeah.
Boston's father was always pretty calm, and so was I.
So again, like it probably didn't affect him mentally the same way, so he didn't feel that, which may be why he was able to take so much, even though physically it was not good for his body. Mentally, he didn't feel it the same way as I would.
Right.
I'm
Everybody.
just
It's more bodybuilding is more like drug warfare. It's who does better with the drugs and who knows how to. It's chemistry. It's chemistry
well,
plus
I think
working
things
out and diet.
changed. Like when I
It's a
was coming up
chemist.
in the 80s, it was about who trained the hardest.
Well, I know you train hard, and I know John did,
Well,
and
because that's what we were taught. Whoever trained the hardest was the winner. I mean, our the guys we looked up to were like Mike Menser, Tom Platz. You know,
well, Mike
these people
Menser, he
that
winded up
trained
doing
crazy
what are
hard.
those minute workouts, and he winded up doing a kind of like drugs and stuff. But you're right about Tom Platz. He was definitely to be looked at. Lou Ferrigno, they worked out hard. Mike Menser, he did that 45-minute Mike Menser workout.
Yeah, but I trained with Mike Menser. He was my roommate for a year, and let me tell you, we trained really hard.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, it was crazy high intensity.
Okay.
So it wasn't 45 minutes of sitting around.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very very intense.
And you got a good pump out of the 45 minutes, or I think you work out longer because I do remember you being in the gym an awful long time when you worked out.
So my training changed over the years. Initially, when I started training as a teenager, I was training with Lee Haney, Gasparian. My training was a more traditional, like more volume. And then I met Mike Menser and I trained with him and lived with him for a year and trained the high intensity. Um, and I still trained high intensity sort of for me before that, but I didn't do all the negatives and forced reps and things like that. Um, Now my training is still high,
But you were there.
high.
You were there for a long time working out. It wasn't 45 minutes, what if I remember right.
Yeah, but it was high intensity. But what I learned for myself is I took longer rest periods between sets because I was lifting really heavy weights. So like even today, like a leg workout will take me 2.5 hours, but really I'm only working, two heavy sets on four different exercises. But it
Uh-huh.
takes me between the warm up sets and getting through that thing, it takes me 2.5 hours because the intensity is so high that I literally have to sit down for a good 5 to 10 minutes between sets to recover to do another one like that.
And how many days a week do you work out
4.
for?
I've been training 4 days a week for, I don't know, as long as I can remember. I have the same split.
Also do cardio?
I do minimal amount of cardio, and only because I just, my metabolism is so fast, I lose weight super easy, and I have Crohn's. So
You
it's,
have Crohn's? Oh.
yeah. And so it's everything I can do. I eat as much as I can, and I'm limited to very clean eating.
When did
Uh,
you get Crohn's?
so I had colitis when I was young, when I was 19. And right after I competed in the Teen American, I had to have my colon removed and had a pull through surgery. And then I didn't get Crohn's until about 15 years ago. Um, it came on just suddenly out of nowhere.
Did any
Um,
of this happen because of the trauma that you were through when you got kidnapped?
no, I don't believe so.
Because I mean, that's
I
pretty
think I did it
crazy
to
what happened to
myself.
you. You know,
I believe I brought it on myself with Adderall, and I was opening a gym, and I had 30 days to get the gym open, and I took Adderall, and I wasn't even training. I was working around the clock, moving
what?
equipment and setting up a gym for 30 days. And right
Why,
after that, I got Crohn's.
why would you take Adderall? Was it prescribed?
Just to stay awake because like I was literally working like 20 hours a day.
So that was black market Adderall, not from a doctor.
I believe so. Yeah. I don't know where I got it from back then, but I didn't take it for bodybuilding purposes. I took it to stay awake so I could work all day. I didn't realize how bad it was for you, but
Well,
I did realize after, the Crohn's came on, I believe it was a combination of, I just overstressed my system with all that work and I wasn't eating correctly. I wasn't drinking enough. Um, I believe that's what brought it on.
weren't you a businessman? Because I know after your workout, you got your bag and you ran out the door. Because
Oh
I
yeah,
know
I
you
was when I was at your gym. I was a marketing manager for Vector Marketing.
weren't
For
you your high income person. I thought you were
yeah,
selling things and
I was making about 150 a year as a marketing manager.
yeah, that's what I thought. You were high income and
Yeah,
you
I wore a suit and tie every day.
right. I remember you walking out with that too. You work out and then you dress up and then you walk out the door.
Yeah, I ran a marketing company. My
Yeah.
job was to recruit and train salespeople.
Oh, because
And I
you didn't look like a business person, but then you had the suit. You seemed like you had expensive things and nice things. You spoke well.
well, that my job was public speaking. That I mean, I spoke in front of people all day long for 12 years.
Right. You're not harsh and you don't use the foul words. You seem to be calm and considerate in your words.
Yeah, I was at that point. I wasn't even. John got me back into competing bodybuilding.
Oh, really? John did. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it wasn't. I was working as a marketing manager and just going to the gym and training for myself. And I was on a bike one day, and John said, "Hey, fat boy,
That's like,
he says we got this Ironman competition coming up. Why don't you want to jump in it?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, fat boy, you don't know me." So I dieted for 5 weeks, and I jumped in the competition. And that's how I got back to competing again.
oh, that sounds like John would say you calling you a fat boy. John was funny. The things that guy would say.
Yeah,
Now, Boston's father, everybody loved him in the gym. He knew everyone's
yeah,
name.
he
Very
was
cordial,
like
very
super nice
friendly.
guy. I got along with John great.
Yeah, everybody loved John. And Boston had John's personality too. But
Yep.
they have that. You didn't know John back in Walnut Creek when he was obsessive compulsive about bodybuilding. In fact, I think he only did one show after we had gotten divorced. But he was crazy when it came to his contest. He had to win. Now, how many shows have you done? Because I know you've done an awful lot of shows.
As a teenager, I probably did at least a dozen shows,
Uh huh.
and then I was in prison for a number of years, so I wasn't able to compete.
Prison at that young age,
20, yeah, 20.
20.
Mm-hmm. I was in
So,
prison from 20 to about 26.
so when did I know you? After 26? I guess after 26 then.
You cut out. What was that?
When you were training at Gold's Gym, how old were you then?
I just I had was probably 1 year out of prison when I started training there. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, so
Yeah,
I
that
was
hush.
probably 27, 20, 27, 28.
Did your temper get you in jail? In prison?
Um, yes, but it was really just really stupid thing. It was a dumb thing that was blown way out of proportion. But yeah, my temper made me do something that I actually didn't really do anything, but me being a big bodybuilder and going kicking in the door, that
Oh,
that
you kicked.
caused it.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
caused you that many years in jail. That sucks.
Well, at the time I was dealing steroids, and that's a whole another story. But I had like a lot of steroids, and I had guns, and they found that stuff. And even though the steroids weren't even illegal back then, they still went after me.
Oh
So
wow. Well,
they construed a lot of charges.
and
But
then when did you get kidnapped?
that was way
Oh, okay.
later. That was we're talking 2007.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, when I was at your gym, like I was working as a marketing manager, and like I said, John got me back into competing. But even then, um, as far as anabolics went, I I kind of stayed with what we did back in the 80s. I never went to the really high dosages. I remember one time I competed with a guy, an Italian guy, at some show in LA, and he was pretty jacked. And he told me the key was 4 grams of testosterone a week, and I had never heard of anything like that. So I decided to give it a try, and I think I tried it for about 2 or 3 weeks. I felt sick. I didn't get any results from that. I wasn't getting any stronger or bigger, just bloated. My body didn't respond to it, and so that was the only time I ever took those kind of dosages, because I just decided it didn't work.
So it's amazing that Boston took those types of that much masses of drugs, and he didn't get that sick. But I guess he was young too.
Well, Boston started at a different sort of era. I remember when Boston started, and one of the reasons we bonded and became friends is because we were both competing at the same time. Obviously, I was going for national shows. He was training for, I think it was Contra Costa, and Dave Palumbo was
Yes, coach.
his coach,
He did.
and yeah, and he was sharing with me, what he was doing in his contest prep. We would talk almost every day, maybe every day every night on the phone because neither one of us could sleep. But that was a time where it the drug thing was getting very experimental. The peptides were just coming in, and they were all new. We had all these different new peptides, so it wasn't just the anabolics. There was all these peptides coming in, and it was like a big science experiment about,
Right.
you could inject this particular IGF into your muscle, and it was supposed to make it grow right there, and you had to do it like right before the workout, and then
Well,
right.
did you have Synthol back in your days? Synthol, where you inject the muscle and it grows. I mean, you put oil into your muscle.
So in the 80s, no. I
No.
mean, no. I mean, that probably was, but I didn't know about it. It wasn't a common thing. We had what was called a cycline. A cycline was an Italian steroid, and you could inject it in the muscle, and it would inflame the muscle temporarily for like 24 to 48 hours max. So you could inject it, like, say, in your arms. If you did it in your biceps and your triceps, you could put maybe an inch on your arms overnight, but it would only be there for the day of the show, and then it'd be gone.
Now, don't you think that's kind of ridiculous in bodybuilding? Like, okay, let's talk about the back when they were competing when their waists were smaller. Like, don't you think now it's getting a little bit too blown up with their stomachs sticking out and protruding?
Well, you say now. I
Well,
if
like,
now is in if actually I think you're talking about maybe early 2000s.
well, like Lee Haney, he had that small waist.
Right. Okay. So you went from one era of the 80s with small waists,
Right,
and then the 90s Dorian came in and the waists started to get bigger.
right,
But
but
today's competitors don't have the blown out waist.
some of them do. It looks like
No,
they're blown
no,
out.
no. They're You have guys that are really huge and they have pretty tight waists.
Hmm.
And I think basically the problem is, in the 90s, people started using a lot of growth hormone and insulin and eating massive amounts of food, and
And
that's what created the blown out waist.
if Boston had a blown out waist, he used to. I was so embarrassed one time we went out to eat, and he put insulin in his stomach beforehand. And I was thinking, what the heck is insulin for? I'm foreign to this. Why would you take insulin? Well, why do you do insulin? To burn body fat and build
No,
muscle?
no, no, no. To absorb the amount of food you're eating, there's no way you can eat thousands of calories a day and digest and absorb that. Your pancreas is just not going to produce that much insulin. Also, growth hormone makes you insulin resistant. So if you're taking a lot of growth hormone, and the more you take, the more insulin resistant you become. If you don't take insulin with it, you're going to run high blood sugars, and you're not going to be able to digest your food.
Now, did you take it also, insulin?
I did, and I did get the blown out wastes, and then I figured out, like, it was because of the way I was taking the insulin, and too much growth hormone. It was just too much insulin, too much growth hormone. And when I say too much, I mean, I never went to the extremes Boston did, but even what we did do, it was just, we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it right. But if you look at today's competitors, they don't have the blown out waist anymore. That's a thing of the past.
They seem to blow up right after them. It seems like they still do
Well,
that.
that's just water retention. I mean, like I said, when I did that show that I dieted on the distilled water, and right after the show, I gained 30 pounds in 3 days because I wasn't taking in any salt and I was severely dehydrated and I just gained 30 pounds of water.
Well, that's pretty unhealthy to gain 30 pounds like that on your heart, your joints, everything. Liver, kidneys to gain 30 pounds.
I would say yes if you kept that 30 pounds. But like for myself, I gained that 30 pounds in 3 days and within a week later it was gone.
That's a lot on the body and the heart. I mean, I
It
don't think
is. I'm not saying it was a good idea, but
it's not a good idea.
I also didn't need to, you know, diet on no salt and distilled water. But that's just what we were taught to do back then. We didn't know better.
Well, you said you took NPP, and that you said people burn victims use NPP.
Nandrolone, phenylpropylate. They also use decadurabolin, which is nandrolone, long-acting nandrolone. Yeah, they use it in burn victims. They used it in AIDS patients with wasting disease. A lot of different medical things where basically your body is deteriorating and you're losing muscle mass or you're recovering from injury and stuff like that. That's what it that's what it's used for medically. That's not bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is something else.
Well, I think a lot of bodybuilders they pull their joints out by going so heavy. I think you went real heavy too, but I mean your joints can't take it, and the NPP will help rejuvenate the joints.
I still train heavy.
You still train.
I've been training heavy for 40 years.
Okay.
40 years pretty much nonstop. 40 plus years. I'm
Well,
still training heavy to this day.
well, I still train fairly heavy for a 64-year-old woman and being natural.
I mean, when I say I train heavy, I'm doing you know, Roger squats with 700 pounds for reps.
That's crazy.
Um, and leg presses with over 1,000 pounds for reps.
Okay, so you're 58, you said, and you're
I'll be
still.
58 November.
Well, that's a lot of weight. I'm surprised your
Now
joints don't give out.
I'm good so far. At least now I've had shoulder injuries, so like I can't bench press super heavy anymore. So I have to press, with dumbbells and machines. I can't do flat bench with like super heavy weight. I definitely can't train as heavy as I could when I was, in my early 40s when I was at my prime and my biggest because I'm not as big as that anymore. I'm 210 pounds now. Back then I got up to 250 pounds. So I'm
Well,
not nearly as strong as I was then.
now Boston, remember he went slow and controlled. At least he might have not gone heavy, but he was slow and controlled. Do you go slow and control, or do you do ballistic and bouncing with the dumbbells?
I mean, my form is really good.
It's
I would,
form-
my form is really good. You're, I, you're not going to lift heavy weight ballistic and not tear stuff. So,
no,
so
yeah.
I tend to be slow and controlled as well. But I don't think Boston was just slow and controlled. Boston just wasn't a high intensity trainer. Um,
Not, I think because it's 17, and I told you that I took him to the doctor, and he had some kidney problems at 17, and I believe this was a precursor for his laziness. If your kidneys are failing at such a young age, I mean, he was able to recoup them, but to have that happen to you at such a young age, I think that was the beginning of his laziness. He kind of got lazy. You know what? He started getting lazy too after the divorce too. I think it was his rebellious, just being rebellious.
it could have been, but there's a mental thing that goes with illness. And I know because I went through it when I was, like I said, when I was 20 years old. I had just competed in the Team America, and I got ulcerative colitis. Just like literally overnight, I was rushed into the emergency room. I didn't know what it was. I stayed in the hospital for 6 months on total TPN, and then eventually had to have my colon removed. And after that, I didn't think I could bodybuild anymore. I just in my head, I was just like, I had this illness. I'm I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could do it, which was wrong, but that's what I thought. So that's when I started getting into trouble. And right shortly after that, I got myself in trouble and ended up in prison.
Hmm.
But I mean, in hindsight, I mean, prison was a bad thing, but it might have saved my life because in prison, um, obviously, I had no steroids. I couldn't take any drugs. They didn't have it there, at least not then. Um, and the only thing I could do was lift weights and go to school. So that's what I did the whole time that I was there.
Hmm.
So if I hadn't gone to prison, I think I would have continued down the road that I was going eventually. And I would have either been a professional bodybuilder or I would have killed myself in the process of trying to do it at that age.
Hmm.
But being locked up, that wasn't an option. So even when I got out of prison, I wasn't even thinking about competing. I was thinking about getting a job and making money
Hmm.
to support myself. So, like I said, it wasn't until a year after I got out that John mentioned competing, and that's when I started back competing again.
No, okay.
But even when I got back into competing at that time, I was already working a full time job, a professional job. So competing was like a hobby on the side. It wasn't like this is how I'm going to make my living and this sort of thing at
Okay.
that point.
Now, well, let's get back to Boston.
Yeah. So what I was talking about when Boston got into it, the peptides were becoming a big thing, and it was like a big science experiment. We would talk about it a lot. What drugs combination and ways to take it you could do to get this result or that result, and so things kind of steered away from training and onto drugs.
Right, everything was about drugs.
Yeah,
Exactly.
everything became about drugs instead of the training.
He come here, and next thing I know, he's talking about drugs on the phone to someone. It wasn't that he's going over their workouts or diets. It was now all about drugs.
I can tell you, like I said, we talked almost every day. And even though I personally, getting ready for a show, was training my ass off, I don't think we ever talked about training. All we talked about was drugs,
Did you?
combinations of drugs, cycle drugs, what drugs you could take, this peptide, that peptide, amounts of drugs.
That's what he would do with me too. He goes, "Well, if you need to compete, maybe you need to take NPP. You need to take some growth hormone. You need to take this." I go, Boston, I've been natural for so long. Of course, he convinced me for the growth hormone and the NPP. That was good for the joints, but the whole scenario was drugs. Now, did you try to tell Boston, to quit it? He's going to die.
So we're talking to the again. This is when I was getting ready for nationals, and he was getting ready for Contra Costa. And at that time, we weren't talking about taking massive dosages of drugs.
Hmm.
We were talking about taking different combinations of drugs and peptides and various things, but it wasn't like he wasn't doing the crazy dosages. That didn't come till a couple years later, I think.
Before he died, he was talking to you, right? You were
Oh
talking.
yeah, we
So
we, we talked all along.
you did tell him it was gonna. I kept telling him you're gonna die. Every
Well, when I saw him post the videos talking about taking grams of trenbolone and grams of testosterone and 20 units of growth hormone, yeah, I told him you're going to kill yourself. This is just like way too much. I told him that many times.
and did you
And
talk to John about it at all?
what's that?
Did you talk to John about it at all? That
I don't think I don't recall if I did talk to John because I at that point you guys had closed up the gym. John had moved on. I mean, I just saw John on Facebook. I didn't see him in person.
talking because I tried to tell him about Boston. That this is
Yeah,
going.
I don't remember talking to John specifically about what Boston was taking. I did run into John a couple times at shows, but I don't think we had that conversation. But
Oh.
um, but I talked to Boston directly about all the things he was taking,
Mhm.
and I told him this is just way too much. It's just you're going to kill yourself. I told him that many times, and he would just laugh. He thought it was funny. Um, I think he honestly believed that the key to bodybuilding success was more drugs.
I think he got messed up in the head. It now became he needed psychological and psychiatry. There was something going on in his brain chemistry where he was so messed up you couldn't even talk to him because it was all about
Look, I'm
drugs.
going to tell you something. I haven't taken trenbolone since, gosh, 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And I've seen videos. I remember I read something from GH15 posted, the GH15 handbook. I read it. It somehow popped up on my email the other day, and I read it, and it was talking about the great benefits of trenbolone and how it's like a magic drug and this and that. And there's a little part of me that's like, you know, if it sounds really good, it's going to burn all your fat off. You're going to gain massive amounts of muscle. You're going to be super strong. But I know from my own personal experience with it what it really does. First of all of my major injuries that I've ever had to do with trenbolone
Hmm.
because it makes you stronger than you actually are. In other words, mentally, you're able to push more weight than your body can handle. So I can say that every serious injury that I have
Well, don't
ever had involved trenbolone.
I think drugs in general do that. Like even Anavar, you become stronger
Yeah,
or
but it's not the same thing. This is like instant strength.
instant.
It's like psychological. You have a mind muscle connection that you have an ability to push more weight just because of the mind muscle connection because you're so aggressive that your body can't handle. So if you train high intensity like I do, and all of a sudden your max was, whatever, 700 pounds, and now the next day you're doing 800 pounds, something's going to break.
Of course.
Anavar doesn't do that. It's not, you, for me anyways, trenbolone is the only thing that ever had that effect where it's like overnight Superman.
Mm.
So there's that. Also, I was old enough by the time I started competing again to be able to like look at myself and see that, I when I would take trenbolone, I would have a bad temper. I would be in a bad mood for no particularly good reason either. Like I would just get mad at something stupid, and I knew I was like flying off the handle in my head, and I didn't want to walk around feeling like that all day. Um, so I learned for myself I could get just as big and strong, taking less harsh compounds. It just take a little bit longer, and I wouldn't get that instant strength, and I wouldn't get that aggression, but it would just take longer, and I just had to put more work into the gym. But
Okay.
for me, that's a better way to go because I know the side effects. But people today, they want that instant gratification. I want to be strong and big now, right
Mm.
now. And,
Right.
like if you don't care about your health and anything else, then tremblone's going to do that for you. It definitely does work, but it doesn't come without a price.
Well, taking steroids in general, there's a price if you overdo it. I mean,
Yes, again, I 100% agree.